Imagine this. You wake up in a foreign country. You open your eyes, and everything around you feels different. The streets outside your window are busy. People are walking fast, talking, laughing, shouting, but you can't understand a single word. You step outside to buy breakfast. You see a small cafe. The smell of fresh coffee and bread makes you smile. You walk in, and the person behind the counter greets you. Their mouth is moving. They are smiling. You know they're speaking to you, but the sounds don't make sense. You freeze. Your mind is blank. You want to answer, but you don't know how. That was me just 4 months before I could speak English with confidence. I had always wanted to speak English. I knew it was the most widely spoken language in the world. In fact, over 1.5 billion people speak English today. That's more than 1 in every 5 people on Earth. It's the language of business, travel, movies, music, and the internet. If you know English, you can connect with almost anyone, anywhere. But knowing this didn't make learning easier. I started with zero. I didn't know how to introduce myself. I didn't know how to ask for directions. I didn't even know how to say that I didn't understand. At first, I thought it would take years to speak well. I had heard people say, you can't learn a language quickly. It takes a lifetime. But something in me refused to believe that. I wanted to try a different way, a focused, intense way. I gave myself a challenge, 4 months, not 4 years. 4 months to go from almost no English to being able to have a real conversation, understand native speakers, and feel comfortable speaking in public. It sounded impossible. And honestly, at the beginning, I doubted myself. But I also knew this. People learn languages faster when they need them for survival. And I needed English badly for my work, for my travel plans, and for my dream of meeting people from all over the world. The next 4 months would change my life completely. I would discover learning methods that schools never taught me. I would make hundreds of mistakes and even embarrass myself in public, but I would also find ways to turn every mistake into a step forward. In this story, I will share exactly how I did it, step by step. You will hear about my first 2 weeks when I was in survival mode, learning only the words and phrases I needed to stay alive in daily life. You will hear about my daily routine, my speaking challenges, and the strange but powerful tricks I used to remember words. And here's the truth, you don't have to be a genius to do it. You don't have to be young. You don't even have to travel abroad. If you have the right system and the right attitude, you can make huge progress in a short time. So, are you ready? Let me take you back to the very beginning of my 4 month journey to the moment I decided to stop dreaming about learning English and start living it. Part 2, the first 2 weeks, survival mode. They say the first steps are always the hardest. For me, the first 2 weeks of learning English felt like trying to swim in deep water without knowing how to float. Every conversation was a wave, and I was just trying not to drown. Day 1, learning to survive, not to impress. In those first days, I realized something important. I didn't need perfect grammar. I didn't need long, beautiful sentences. I needed survival English. If I was hungry, I needed to know how to order food. If I was lost, I needed to ask for directions. If I didn't understand something, I needed to say so. My goal was simple: learn the 50 most useful phrases in English. Things like, where is? How much is this? I don't understand. Can you repeat that, please? I am learning English. These phrases became my lifeline. The power of micro-vocabulary. Did you know that in English, the 1,000 most common words make up about 85% of everyday conversations? That means you can understand most daily situations without learning rare or complicated words. So instead of studying academic English, I focused on simple, high-frequency words. Food items, bread, water, coffee, rice. Directions left, right, straight. People man, woman, friend, teacher. Actions go, come, eat, buy, need. I didn't just memorize them, I used them immediately in real life. Flashcards everywhere. On the bus, in line at the supermarket, waiting for the kettle to boil every free moment was a chance to learn. I installed a flashcard app on my phone. I used Anki, but any app works. I set it to show me just 10 new words a day. Labeling my world. I took sticky notes and wrote the English word for every object in my home. My fridge had fridge on it. The door said door. The mirror said mirror. It looked funny. My friends laughed when they visited, but it worked. Every time I saw an object, my brain connected it with the English word. Listening without pressure. At first, I couldn't understand native speakers at all. It felt like they were speaking too fast and the words melted together, but I had read that the brain learns patterns through repetition, so every morning while making breakfast, I played short English audio even if I understood only 5%. In just 2 weeks, my ears started recognizing familiar sounds. I realized that words like gonna, going to, or wanna, want to appear a lot in real conversation, but they aren't in textbooks. Speaking from day one. This was scary. I didn't want to speak until my English was good, but I quickly learned that if you wait for perfect English, you'll never start speaking. So on the very first day, I forced myself to say something to a shop assistant in English. It was short, just, "Hello, coffee, please." She understood. That small success felt like climbing a mountain. Mistakes as teachers. In week one, I once told someone, "I am boring," instead of "I am bored." They laughed, and I felt embarrassed. But I never forgot the difference after that. I started to see mistakes not as failures, but as free lessons. The 2-week result. After 14 days, I wasn't fluent, but I could buy food without pointing, ask for the bathroom, introduce myself and say where I was from, understand about 20 to 30% of simple conversations. It wasn't much, but it was enough to survive, and survival was the foundation I needed before I could grow. In the next part of my journey, I moved from just surviving to thriving, building a daily routine that would help me learn English faster than I ever thought possible. Part 3. Building a daily routine. They say you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your habits. I had a big goal, speak English in 4 months. But without the right habits, that goal was just a dream. After my first 2 weeks of survival English, I realized something important. If I wanted real progress, English couldn't just be a subject I studied, it had to become part of my life. Many learners study for 1 hour a week and wonder why they don't improve. The truth is, research shows that daily contact with a language is the #1 predictor of progress. Even 15 minutes a day is better than 2 hours once a week, but I wasn't aiming for 15 minutes. I decided to build a 3 to 4 hour daily routine broken into small, manageable sessions so I wouldn't get tired or bored. Morning, the listening boost, 30 to 45 minutes. My morning started before breakfast. While making coffee, I played an English podcast or YouTube video. At first, I understood very little, but that wasn't the point. I was training my brain to hear English sounds. Linguists say our brains need to hear thousands of hours of a language before we can speak it well. By listening every morning, I was slowly building that sound library in my head. Sometimes I chose easy content, like English stories for learners. Other days, I listened to news headlines just to pick out familiar words. The goal wasn't to understand everything, it was to start the day in English. Late morning, reading and vocabulary, 45 minutes. After breakfast, I sat down with a short English text, maybe an article, a graded reader, or even social media posts in English. I read slowly, underlining new words. Here's my trick. I never wrote a word alone. If I learned delicious, I also wrote the phrase, "This pizza is delicious." Phrases stick in your memory better than single words. I also used spaced repetition apps like Anki to review new vocabulary. Studies show that reviewing a word 5 to 7 times over spaced intervals makes it far more likely to stay in your long-term memory. Afternoon speaking practice, 30 to 60 minutes. This was my most important session. I knew that speaking every day was the fastest way to improve fluency. Some days I had short conversations with language partners on HelloTalk or Tandem. Other days I booked 15 to 30 minutes with an online tutor on italki. Even when I had no one to talk to, I practiced by speaking to myself in the mirror. I would describe my day in English, ask myself questions, and answer them out loud. It felt strange at first, but it trained my mouth to produce English sounds without hesitation. Evening review and writing, 30 minutes. Before bed, I did a quick review of everything I learned that day. I wrote a short diary entry in English, just 5 to 6 sentences about what I did, saw, or thought. Writing helped me notice grammar patterns and remember vocabulary. Plus, when I looked back at my old diary entries weeks later, I could see real improvement, which kept me motivated. The secret ingredient, micro-practice. Outside my formal study times, I had small English moments all day. Changing my phone and computer language to English. Thinking in English while walking or shopping. Replacing my native music playlist with English songs and reading the lyrics. These little moments kept my brain in English mode even when I wasn't studying. The result after 1 month of routine? By the end of my first full month, my confidence was growing. I could follow simple conversations without feeling lost. My vocabulary had doubled since week 1. And most importantly, English no longer felt like a school subject. It felt like part of my everyday life. I was still far from fluent, but I had momentum. And in language learning, momentum is everything. In the next part, I'll share how I took immersion to the next level, bringing English into every corner of my life, even without traveling to an English-speaking country. Part 4, Immersion Without Traveling. People often say, if you want to learn English fast, you must live in an English-speaking country. I disagree. I learned English without leaving my city, without even leaving my apartment for most of the day. How? I brought English to me. I couldn't afford to move to London or New York. I couldn't just pack my bags and fly to an English-speaking country. But I knew something important. The brain doesn't care where you are, it cares what you feed it. If I surrounded myself with English every day, I could trick my brain into thinking I was living abroad, and that's exactly what I did. Step 1, changing my environment. The first thing I did was change the language settings on all my devices. My phone, my laptop, my apps, everything was now in English. At first, it was uncomfortable. I had to search for familiar buttons, but within days, I started learning useful tech words like settings, battery, update, and storage without opening a textbook. Step 2, English media diet. I replaced almost all my entertainment with English content. Movies, TV series, YouTube videos, podcasts, music, all in English. Here's an interesting fact. Studies show that watching TV series in your target language with subtitles in that same language can improve vocabulary by up to 30% in just a few months. So I stopped watching with subtitles in my native language. If I needed help, I used English subtitles. This way, my ears and eyes were working together. Step 3, bringing English into my hobbies. I didn't only study English, I lived it through my hobbies. I like cooking, so I started following English recipe channels on YouTube. I love reading about technology, so I switched to tech blogs in English. By combining English with things I enjoyed, I didn't feel like I was studying. I felt like I was just living my life, but in a different language. Step 4, social media in English. Social media can be a huge distraction, but it can also be a powerful learning tool. I unfollowed many accounts in my native language and replaced them with English-speaking creators. Instagram posts, Facebook updates, TikTok videos, all of them became tiny English lessons during the day. Step 5. Thinking in English. This was one of the hardest but most powerful habits. Whenever possible, I tried to think in English instead of translating in my head. For example, if I saw a dog on the street, instead of thinking in my language, I would think, dog, brown dog, that dog looks happy. At first, it felt slow and unnatural. But after weeks of practice, my brain started reaching for English words automatically. Step 6. Virtual English World. I joined online communities where English was the only language. Gaming servers, Facebook groups, Reddit forums, Discord chats, places where people from around the world talked about common interests. It didn't matter that they were strangers. What mattered was that I was using English in real conversations every day. The result after 1 month of immersion. After a month of living this way, something amazing happened. I was walking down the street and overheard two tourists speaking English. For the first time, I understood their conversation without trying. It felt effortless, like my brain had switched into English mode. Here's the truth. You don't need to live in London to immerse yourself in English. You can create your own English world right where you are. It takes effort, but it's possible, and it works. In the next part of my journey, I'll tell you about the scariest part of learning a language, speaking, and how I made it a daily habit even when I wanted to hide in silence. Part 5. Speaking every day. Speaking English was the scariest part for me. I could listen, I could read, I could even write a little. But the moment I had to open my mouth, my brain froze. My heart would beat faster. I worried about mistakes, about sounding stupid, about people laughing. But here's the truth. If you want to speak English well, you must speak every single day. There's no shortcut. It's like learning to swim. You can't do it by reading about swimming. You have to get it in the water. The fear of speaking. In the beginning, I avoided speaking. I told myself, I'll speak when I'm ready. But I learned an important lesson. You will never feel ready. You have to start before you're ready. Did you know that according to language research, learners who start speaking from day one progress 2 to 3 times faster than those who wait? That statistic changed my mind. I didn't want to waste time, so I made speaking my daily challenge. Day 1, the first sentence. On my first speaking day, I went to a cafe and said, "Hello, coffee, please." It was simple, but it was my first real interaction in English. The barista smiled and replied, "Sure, what size?" I froze for a moment, but then I guessed, small. I walked out of the cafe with my coffee and a huge smile. That tiny conversation gave me more confidence than any grammar exercise ever did. Finding speaking partners. I started using language exchange apps like HelloTalk and Tandem. The idea was simple. I help someone practice my language. They help me with English. Some conversations lasted only a few minutes, others turned into long friendships. For more structured practice, I used italki and Cambly to speak with tutors. Even 15 minutes a day made a big difference. When you talk to a tutor regularly, you stop worrying about judgment and start focusing on improving. Speaking to myself. Some days I had no one to talk to, but that wasn't an excuse to skip speaking. I practiced in front of the mirror, describing my day, asking myself questions and answering them. For example, what did I eat today? I ate pasta for lunch. It was delicious. What will I do tomorrow? Tomorrow I will go to the park. This might sound silly, but it works. It trains your mouth to move in English and helps you think faster. Recording my voice. I also started recording myself reading short texts or telling a story. Listening to my own voice was uncomfortable at first, but it helped me notice pronunciation problems and improve them. Over time, I could compare my old recordings with new ones and hear real progress using conversation connectors. One trick that helped me sound more natural was learning conversation connectors, small phrases like, actually, you know, well, let me think. These little words gave me time to think without long, awkward pauses. The result after a month of daily speaking. After speaking every day for a month, something amazing happened. I stopped translating in my head. Words came out naturally. I wasn't fluent yet, but I could have 10 to 15-minute conversations without panic. And here's what I learned. Speaking every day isn't about being perfect, it's about building confidence and making speaking feel normal. In the next part, I'll share how I expanded my vocabulary quickly, not by memorizing endless word lists, but by learning words in smart, connected ways that made them stick in my memory. Part 6: Vocabulary Explosion. I used to think learning English vocabulary meant memorizing endless lists of random words. I tried that in school, and it didn't work. I would spend hours learning, but a week later, I forgot half of them. Then I discovered a better way, a way to learn faster, remember longer, and actually use the words in conversation. And when I applied it, my vocabulary didn't just grow, it exploded. Why vocabulary matters. Here's a surprising fact. The average native English speaker knows around 20,000 to 35,000 words. But to have normal daily conversations, you only need about 3,000 words. Even better, the 1,000 most common words cover more than 85% of everyday speech. This means you don't have to learn everything to speak well. You just have to learn the right words in the right way. Step 1: learning phrases, not just words. Instead of learning apple alone, I learned, I'm eating an apple. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. Why? Because words live inside sentences. When you learn them in context, your brain remembers them better, and you also learn grammar naturally. Step 2: grouping words by topic. I stopped mixing random words together. Instead, I learned by themes. Food, bread, rice, soup, pasta, salad. Travel, ticket, luggage, passport, flight, hotel. Work, meeting, deadline, report, boss, colleague. By grouping them, I could use them together in real conversations. If I was traveling, I could talk about airports and hotels. If I was cooking, I knew all the words for ingredients. Step 3: spaced repetition. I used an app with spaced repetition, a learning method that shows you words just before you're about to forget them. This way, I didn't waste time reviewing words I already knew well. I set a small goal: learn 10 to 15 new words every day. That's around 70 to 100 new words a week. And in 1 month, that's 300 to 400 new words without feeling overwhelmed. Step 4: using new words immediately. This was my secret weapon. When I learned a new word, I used it in writing, speaking, or texting the same day. If I learned excited, I would send a message to a friend. I'm excited for the weekend. Using a word quickly makes it part of your active vocabulary, the words you can use without thinking. Step 5: reading for vocabulary. I started reading short books called graded readers. They are stories written for learners with limited vocabulary but natural sentences. Whenever I saw a new word, I guessed its meaning from context before checking the dictionary. This method made me remember words much better than just memorizing lists. Step 6: keeping a vocabulary notebook. I had a small notebook where I wrote new words, a short definition in English, 1 or 2 example sentences. Every week, I reviewed my notebook like a personal dictionary. It was small enough to carry in my pocket so I could study on the bus or in a cafe. The result after 2 months of vocabulary training? In just 2 months, my vocabulary doubled. I could describe more things, express my feelings better, and understand more when listening. Suddenly, conversations felt easier. If I didn't know one word, I could explain it using other words I had learned, and people understood me. Here's what I learned. Vocabulary growth is not about memorizing thousands of words at once. It's about learning a few words every day in context and actually using them. In the next part, I'll talk about something every learner struggles with, fear and mistakes, and how I learned to see them not as failures, but as my most powerful teachers. Part 7, Overcoming Fear. I used to think mistakes were the enemy. In school, mistakes meant red marks on my test. They meant I was wrong. So when I started speaking English, I tried to avoid mistakes at all costs. And do you know what happened? I avoided speaking too. The fear that stops progress. Many learners feel the same way. In fact, studies in language learning show that fear of making mistakes is one of the top 3 reasons people fail to speak a new language. When we're afraid, we stay silent. And when we stay silent, we stop learning. I realized I had 2 choices. 1. Wait until my English was perfect before speaking, which could take years, or 2. Start speaking now and use mistakes as a learning tool. I chose the second option, my most embarrassing mistake. One day, early in my learning journey, I told someone, "I am boring," instead of "I am bored." They laughed, not in a cruel way, but because it was funny. I felt my face turn red, but I never forgot the difference between those 2 phrases again. Another time, I tried to order chicken in a restaurant, but accidentally asked for kitchen. The waiter looked confused and said, "You want the kitchen?" We both laughed, and I corrected myself. These moments were uncomfortable, but they taught me something important. You remember a mistake far longer than a word you read once in a book. Changing my mindset. I stopped thinking of mistakes as proof that I was bad at English. Instead, I saw them as proof that I was trying. I learned to replace the sentence, "I made a mistake," with "I learned something new." That small change made speaking less stressful. The 10,000 mistake rule. I gave myself a challenge. Make 10,000 mistakes in English. Why? Because the more mistakes I made, the more I would learn. When you think like this, fear disappears. Every wrong sentence is one step closer to fluency. How native speakers see mistakes. Here's something many learners don't realize. Most native English speakers don't care if you make mistakes. In fact, they often admire you for speaking their language at all. When I stopped worrying about judgment, conversations became more relaxed and fun. Learning from mistakes. I developed a simple system. 1. After speaking, I wrote down the words or sentences I struggled with. 2. I looked up the correct way to say them. 3. I practiced them in different sentences until they felt natural. This turned every mistake into a permanent lesson. The result after 3 months of embracing mistakes. Something amazing happened. I spoke more often with more confidence, and the more I spoke, the fewer mistakes I made. It was a cycle: more speaking, more mistakes, more learning, better English. Here's the truth. If you're afraid to make mistakes, you will always be afraid to speak. But if you accept them, even welcome them, your English will grow faster than you think. In the next part, I'll share how I tested myself after months of learning, throwing myself into real-life English situations to see how much I had improved. Part 8, Testing Myself. You can study for months, read books, watch videos, and speak to yourself in the mirror. But the real question is, can you use English in the real world with real people when it really matters? After months of learning, I wanted to know if all my effort actually worked. I didn't want to just feel like I was improving, I wanted proof. The first real test, a day without my native language. I decided to have one full day where I would only use English. No speaking my native language, no reading in it, no listening to it, just English. That meant ordering food in English, speaking to friends in English, and even thinking in English. It was harder than I expected. Sometimes I didn't know the right word, so I had to describe things in another way. If I didn't know umbrella, I'd say the thing for rain. By the end of the day, I was tired but proud. I realized that I could survive using only English, even if it wasn't perfect. The Stranger Conversation Challenge. Another test I gave myself was to start conversations with strangers. Why strangers? Because they don't know you and you can't prepare in advance. I went to a tourist area in my city and asked visitors simple questions in English. Where are you from? Are you enjoying your trip? Do you need help finding something? Most people smiled and replied. Some spoke slowly for me, and some spoke quickly, which was a great listening challenge. It felt like a real-life exam, but more exciting. Joining an English event. I found a local language exchange meeting at a cafe. There were people from different countries, and the rule was only English. At first, my brain was working so hard just to keep up with the conversation. But after an hour, I started feeling more comfortable. The best part? I made friends who wanted to meet again, and every time we met, my English improved. The listening test, movies without subtitles. I also tested my listening skills by watching a movie in English without any subtitles. The first time, I understood maybe 50 to 60% of the dialogue, but I didn't stop the movie to check every word. I focused on the story and guessed the meaning. A few months earlier, I would have understood almost nothing. Now I could follow along and even laugh at the jokes. Tracking my progress. To measure my improvement, I recorded myself speaking for 5 minutes about any topic once a month. When I compared my first recording to the latest one, I was shocked. In the first, I hesitated a lot, my sentences were short, and my pronunciation was shaky. In the new one, I spoke more smoothly, used more vocabulary, and sounded more confident. The result of testing myself? These tests proved something important. I didn't need to wait until I was fluent to use English. I was already able to communicate, to connect, and to handle real-life situations. And that's the goal of learning a language, not perfection, but connection. In the final part of this story, I'll share the biggest lessons I learned from my 4-month English journey and how you can apply them to your own learning, no matter where you are starting from. Part 9, Results After 4 Months. 4 months ago, I could barely introduce myself in English without feeling nervous. Now, I was having full conversations, understanding movies, and even thinking in English without trying. It wasn't magic. It was daily work, smart methods, and a decision not to give up. The final self-test. On the very last day of my 4-month challenge, I repeated the same tests I had done in the beginning. I recorded myself speaking about my day. I tried a full day of only English. I had conversations with strangers. The difference was huge. In my first recording from month 1, I spoke for less than 90 seconds before running out of words. Now, I could speak for more than 10 minutes without stopping. My grammar wasn't perfect, but my message was clear. Vocabulary growth. When I started, I knew maybe 700 to 800 English words, mostly from school. By the end, I estimated I knew around 2,500 to 3,000 words, enough for most everyday conversations. And the best part? These weren't just words I recognized, they were words I could actually use when speaking. Listening skills. At the beginning, I could understand maybe 20 to 30% of a casual conversation between native speakers. By month 4, I was catching 70 to 80%, depending on the topic and accent. I still had to guess some words, but I was following the meaning without getting lost. Speaking confidence. This was my biggest transformation. In month 1, I would avoid speaking unless I absolutely had to. In month 4, I was starting conversations myself, even with native speakers. I wasn't translating in my head anymore. Sentences came naturally and my pauses were shorter. Mistakes still happened, but they didn't stop me. Daily life in English. English had stopped being just a subject for me. It had become part of my lifestyle. My phone and computer were still in English. I read news articles in English every morning. Most of my entertainment, movies, podcasts, YouTube was in English. It didn't feel like study anymore. It felt like living. The power of consistency. If there's one lesson I learned, it's this. You don't need to study for 8 hours a day to see results. But you do need to study every day. Even 1 to 2 hours daily, split into short sessions, can completely change your level in a few months if you focus on listening, speaking, reading, and vocabulary together. The 4-month outcome in numbers. Vocabulary from 800 to 3,000 active words. Listening comprehension from 25% to 75%. Speaking time without stopping from 1 to 2 minutes to 10 to 15 minutes. Confidence level from avoid speaking to start conversations. Final reflection. 4 months ago, I dreamed of speaking English confidently. Today, I'm living that dream, and it's only the beginning. I still make mistakes. I still have a lot to learn. But I now know something powerful. English is not just for talented people, it's for anyone who is willing to put in the time every single day. If I can do it in 4 months, you can too. Final conclusion, your turn to begin. 4 months. That's all it took to go from a nervous beginner to a confident English speaker who could start conversations, understand most of what I heard, and live daily life in a new language. It wasn't easy. There were days I didn't feel like studying, days when I made mistakes that felt embarrassing, days when I thought, maybe I'm not improving at all. But here's the truth. Progress in language learning is like watching a tree grow. You don't see the change every day, but if you keep watering it, keep giving it light, one day you realize it's grown tall and strong. For me, English was that tree, and every hour of listening, every conversation, every notebook page, every mistake was water for that tree. I didn't do anything magical. I didn't move abroad. I didn't spend thousands of dollars. I just built a daily routine, surrounded myself with English, spoke every single day, and turned mistakes into lessons. The results? I tripled my vocabulary. I improved my listening from 25% to over 75% comprehension. I went from 1-minute nervous answers to 10 to 15-minute flowing conversations. If you're listening to this right now, maybe you've been thinking about improving your English. Maybe you've been waiting for the perfect time. Let me tell you, the perfect time is today. You don't need to do everything at once. Start small. Maybe it's 15 minutes of listening. Maybe it's one new word you use in a sentence today. Maybe it's saying hello to someone in English, even if your voice shakes. Because the moment you start, the clock begins ticking, and 4 months from now, you could be telling your own success story. English is not about perfection. It's about connection. It's about opening doors to new opportunities, new friendships, new experiences, and all of that is waiting for you if you take the first step. So here's my final message to you. Don't wait for confidence to come before you speak. Speak and confidence will come. Start today, and 4 months from now, surprise yourself with how far you've come.